Welcome to the Observation Room. I am your host, Michelle Vaughn. I am really glad you are here. I want to begin with something I've learned from sitting across from people for a very long time. So, the first answer is usually the most polished answer, right? It's the answer we've already rehearsed in our head. It's the answer we've already explained to our friends. It's the version that makes us sound reasonable and responsible and self aware, maybe a little less afraid of what we actually feel. Now, by the time most of us have already asked another person for advice, we already spent days or weeks or sometimes years building a case. We've gathered the evidence, we've anticipated objections, we've edited out the parts that could embarrass us. There's a courtroom that's already happened in our head. We've decided which details make us look good and which ones are too complicated to explain. Then we hand someone the closing argument and say, "What do you think I should do?" Because people love us or because they want to be helpful, they answer the argument we gave to them. They tell us, stay or leave, launch, wait, charge more, charge less, try harder, forgive, forget, move on, be patient, stop overthinking, think more positively. Now, sometimes that advice is excellent. Sometimes it works. I've noticed that most people are not actually even looking for advice. They are looking for relief. They want relief from the noise in their own mind, relief from the pressure to make the right choice, relief from being the person who's supposed to know, relief from carrying 10 different opinions at the same time, relief from the exhausting work of explaining a decision they have not fully even admitted to themselves yet. And that is a very different need. Because when the real need is relief, another opinion can make the room even louder. So let's say you ask 5 people what you should do. And now you're not just carrying one difficult decision, you're carrying 5 personalities and 5 histories and 5 fears, 5 definitions of success, 5 versions of what they would do if they were living a life that's not even yours. What if the answer might not even be missing? What if it's just crowded? I want to stay here for a second because I think we've built an entire culture around immediate answers. So we're expected to have an opinion before the story is even finished. Something happens in the news and people want your reaction right away. You have to just know. Someone sends an email and you feel the pressure to respond immediately. A decision appears, and before you've even understood what it's asking of you, you're searching for either a podcast or a post or an expert or a sign or a quote or a person who can tell you, what does it mean? And I understand the irony of saying that while on a podcast. But I don't want this room to become another voice that trained you to distrust your own voice. This room is going to be useful to you because it gives you enough space to hear what is already trying to become clear to you. That's different than telling you that you know everything, right? Because you do not know everything. I do not know everything. There are times when you do need information, expertise, legal guidance, financial guidance, medical guidance, the experience of someone who's already walked through something before us. But advice should be information that you can use, right? It doesn't become your authority that you hand away because making your own decision feels uncomfortable. There's a difference between asking for perspective and asking someone else to become responsible for your life. Now, I've been guilty of doing both. They feel very different afterwards. When you ask for perspective, you're able to listen and consider and remain connected to your own self, your own voice. When you ask someone else to carry that decision, you might feel temporary relief. But if the outcome hurts, you resent them. And if the outcome works, you still might not even trust yourself because you believe the wisdom had lived outside of you. That's why I'm so interested in the quality of the room you create around a decision, around making decisions. So a loud room produces performance. A quiet room produces honesty. Now, The honesty actually doesn't always come instantly. Sometimes the quiet is so uncomfortable at first. I've watched this happen in conversations over and over again. And someone sits down and tells me what's happening. Their first answer is super polished. The language is organized. The reasons are practical. The story has a beginning and a middle and an ending. So I listen. Then I ask the one question. Then they give me another answer. And that answer is usually a little less polished. It contains a detail that they didn't include the first time. Maybe their voice changes, or maybe they look away. Maybe they laugh in a place that's not actually even funny. So I keep listening. Then there is more silence. I used to think a good consultant was supposed to fill in that silence. I thought I needed to prove my value quickly and say the smart thing and offer the solution and keep the conversation moving. I'm pretty sure the silence is now where the real conversation actually begins. The silence makes the rehearsed answer run out the door. There's nothing left to perform. There's nothing left to add to the case. The courtroom is closed. Eventually, someone says, I have never actually said that out loud before. Now that sentence changes a room. And I didn't even give them an answer. They heard themselves. Now, those moments are so sacred to me because you can almost feel a person become more honest while they're speaking it. They're not discovering a brand new fact. They're allowing a truth that they have kept underneath the noise to have its own voice. It's one of the reasons I think the right conversation can change so much. A powerful conversation is not always the one where someone tells you something brilliant. Sometimes that is the one where you finally hear yourself without interruption. I have spent an embarrassing amount of time, an embarrassing amount of my life trying to be understood. I'm talking decades. If someone misunderstood me, I believe there had to be a better explanation. I could find the exact words. I could add more context. I could walk them through the timeline, or I could show them what I meant, or why I did it, or why I felt the way I felt, and why my decision made perfect sense. I still get caught up in the habit of doing this at times. And sometimes that explanation matters. Communication really matters. Accountability matters. We should be willing to clarify ourselves and listen when our impact does not match our intention. There is a point, though, when explaining stops becoming communication and it starts becoming negotiation. You're not helping someone understand themselves. You're helping them try to negotiate with their perception of you. You're trying to make them approve the decision so that you can feel safe making it. That's a hard realization for me, and it took me a long time to get it. I even fall back sometimes. Because the longer I had to defend an idea, the more likely it was the thing that I was defending was not even the truth for me anymore. I was defending an identity. I was defending being the responsible one, or the helper, or the strong one, or the independent one, or the successful one, or the person who figures it all out. The person who didn't disappoint people anymore. Or the person whose choices made sense from the outside. Those identities can become so familiar that we mistake them for who we are. And then life asks us to make a decision that doesn't match that role. And suddenly the room gets super crowded. The responsible one's not allowed to change her mind anymore. The helper's not allowed to say no. The independent one is not allowed to need support. The successful one is not allowed to want a quieter life. Or how about the person who always figures it out is not allowed to say, I don't know anymore, or I don't know yet. So the answer might actually be really clear, but it's inconvenient. It's an inconvenience to the identity we have already built. Now that's an important distinction. Confusion and inconvenience do not feel the same, but we often call them both confusion. So sometimes we know exactly what we want. We just do not want the consequences of omitting that. We know the conversation that needs to happen, or we know the boundary that needs to be named, or we know the work that no longer fits, or the offer that has changed, or we know the relationship that has been asking for a truth that we've been avoiding, or we know the old definition of success is becoming too expensive. But knowing creates responsibility. So most people avoid it. And all this is a lot of times just unconscious. Once you admit what you know, you might have to act differently. What if you might actually disappoint someone, or you might change a plan, or you might lose the comfort of appearing consistent. You may have become a version of yourself that nobody has actually met yet. Maybe not even yourself. So we keep collecting advice, hoping someone will give us a version of the answer that lets everything stay the same. Exactly opposite of what we said we wanted. I understand that impulse, but I don't think that clarity exists to make everything stay the same. Clarity exists to make honesty possible. Now, there's one question I ask myself when I notice that I'm over-explaining or defending or holding too tightly to a particular version of the story. What am I trying to protect? That question has opened more doors for me than asking, how do I make this work? What am I trying to protect? My reputation? My image of myself? A promise I made when I had different information? A relationship? A financial number? Years I've already invested? That hope, if I waited long enough, something would become what I wanted it to be. Now, that answer is not always bad. Protection is not the enemy. There are ways of thinking that helped us survive very real things. Those instincts kept us safe. They kept us here. They kept us alive. They're the walls we built because at that time, that is exactly what we needed. We should not shame that version of ourselves that learned how to survive. But survival strategies deserve gratitude and not permanent authority. Something that can have saved you once and still be unqualified to run all your future decisions. I've seen this even in businesses. One bad experience creates a policy. Or how about our government? The policy makes sense at the time. 5 years later, nobody remembers the original problem. And even if they do, they're still trying to make a working rule around that slows the entire company down. And for something that's not even needed anymore. So the rule's no longer protecting the business from the original danger. It's protecting the business from the possibility of ever being surprised again. People do the same thing to themselves or to their relationships. You get hurt and you decide you'll never need anyone that much again. Or you're rejected and you decide, I'll never be that visible again. Or you lose money and you decide every opportunity is dangerous. I'm never taking that risk. I'm never going to take a risk again. Or you're disappointed and you decide hope itself is the problem. So I'm just not going to be hopeful anymore. It's easier to just not hope. The decision is very understandable. It might even feel intelligent or logical. But walls are not very good at distinguishing danger from possibility. They block both at the same time. Walls keep pain out, but they keep intimacy out too. Walls keep embarrassment out, but walls keep opportunity out too. They can keep uncertainty out, but they also keep wonder out. At some point, protection becomes a prison. The prison is especially difficult to see when you're the person who built it, because you know exactly why every single wall exists. That's when the question changes. It's not, was I wrong to protect myself? The better question here is, does this protection still belong to the life I'm living now? That question is gentle enough to honor what happened and honest enough to make room for what could happen next. This is why I do not believe that the best advisor is the loudest one in the room. I think the best advisor is the one who isn't the one who makes every decision for you or creates a dependency or leaves you believing that you can't move without calling them again. And the same thing can be said for parenthood or for employee-boss relationships, right? The best advisor returns you your own authority. That does not mean they will agree with everything you say. The real advisor might actually challenge you or point to a sentence that doesn't actually match the facts. Or they might tell you when the plan and the stated priority are moving in opposite directions. They may ask the question you hope nobody would ask. But the goal is for not is not really for you to leave impressed with them. The goal is for you to leave clearer about yourself. That's how I think about my work. And it's really how I parented for a long time while my boys were younger. People with serious decisions do not always need a louder person. They need a room where accuracy is possible. They need someone who can listen beyond the polished answer, notice what changes when a certain word is spoken, or hold the silence long enough for the rehearsed version to run out. They need truth without humiliation. They need challenge without performance. Perspective without having their authority taken away. I think we can learn to create some of that room for ourselves too. Not perfectly, we are human. We will always have blind spots and emotions and attachments and days when the noise wins. Me and almost every other person, human I know. Before we ask the whole world, what should we do? We need to clear the room a little. Now here's what that looks like for me. I start with one sentence. What do I know before I can explain it? It's not about what I can prove. It doesn't even matter what anybody else understands. It doesn't matter if it's mature or strategic or spiritual or loyal or even impressive. What do I know before I can explain it? Now, sometimes that answer is very plain. I know I don't want to keep organizing my life around this. I know I've been asking the same thing for a long time. I know the offer no longer reflects the work I want to do. I know I'm tired, and maybe I should make this decision another time. I shouldn't do it from exhaustion. I know I want to try even though I can't guarantee the outcome. I know I need more information before I can say yes. Plain truth is not always dramatic. That is part of why we miss it. We expect clarity to arrive like a movie scene. Sometimes it arrives at one quiet sentence that does not need to argue. Then I ask, what am I trying to protect? This is where the crowd starts to reveal itself. Maybe I'm protecting the image of being dependable, or maybe I'm protecting money, or could I be protecting the history? Or am I protecting myself from being seen changing my mind? Or maybe I'm protecting myself from someone else having a feeling they're allowed to have. I'm not the ownership of everyone else's feelings. Again, protection is not automatically wrong. The question simply helps me see what else is in the room with me. Then I ask, what would I choose if I had nobody to agree with me? Now, that question does not mean other people don't matter. Our decisions affect families and teams and partners and clients and communities, and we have a responsibility, and we should consider impact. Impact matters. But consideration is different from requiring unanimous emotional approval before we're allowed to live honestly. Now, what would I choose if I had nobody to agree? Sometimes the answer surprises me. And at times it confirms what I already knew. Sometimes I realize I don't even have the answer yet. And that's allowed too. I do not know. I do not know yet can be an honest answer. It's very different from filling the space with a false certainty, because uncertainty makes us nervous. Now, finally, I'll ask myself, what conversation does this truth require? Because clarity that never enters real life can become another form of avoidance. Maybe the conversation with another person, or maybe it's with your team, or maybe it's a financial professional, or maybe it's an email, or even a calendar decision you need to make, or a request for more information, or a sentence you finally write down without editing it into something more acceptable. You don't have to redesign your whole life in one morning. I did that sometimes. But that's not what it was requiring of me. Truth usually asks for some form of participation, a conversation, or a pause, or a no, or a yes, or a question, a different kind of deadline, a willingness to stop pretending the old arrangement is still working. And that's how the quiet answer begins to become a lived answer. I want to give you a real example of how crowded decisions become. Let's imagine someone is starting a new job. And on paper, it's Or they're considering a new job. Let's just do that. Somebody's considering a new job, and on paper, it's a good opportunity. A better title, more money, more visibility. It's the kind of move other people would immediately celebrate. She asks her friends what she should do, and they say, take it. It's what you've been working for. Every time she thinks about saying yes, her body gets heavy. Now, the quick conclusion is that she's afraid of growth, and maybe she is. That's a possibility. But if she clears the room, she might hear something more specific. Maybe the job requires a way of living she no longer wants, or maybe the title belongs to an old definition of success for her. Maybe the money is attractive, but the actual life around the money isn't. Maybe she wants recognition, but not the responsibility, or maybe she needs to negotiate different terms. Maybe she's simply tired and needs more time before she makes a decision. The point is not that she should reject the job. The point is everyone thinks this is a good opportunity is not the same as an answer. A life can look impressive and still be wrong for the person who has to wake up inside of it. Now let's imagine a business owner who keeps asking whether she should launch a new offer. She's done the research, she's built the page, she's asked people for feedback, and she keeps changing the name or the price, the promise, the date, and the crowd says she needs a better strategy. What if the quiet answer is that maybe she doesn't want to sell that offer anymore? Or maybe she deeply wants to sell it and is terrified of being seen wanting it. Two different completely truths. And no marketing tactic can decide between the two of them. The answer that appears when the performance falls away is that. What do I know before I can explain it? Who or what am I trying to protect? What would I choose if nobody had to agree? What conversation does this truth require? Now, this is not a perfect system. It's not supposed to be. It's a way of creating enough space to tell the truth before the world starts voting on it. I think a lot of us have been taught to believe that confidence means certainty. It does not. Sometimes confidence is the ability to remain with yourself while the answer is still forming. It's being able to say, I need another day, or I need to ask a better question, or I need more information. I understand your opinion. I'm not ready to make that my decision. I changed my mind, or I was wrong, or that used to fit. It doesn't fit anymore. Those sentences require a different kind of strength than pretending we were certain all along. I hope I never become so committed to looking consistent that I lose the ability to become accurate. Consistency is useful when it's connected to values. It becomes dangerous when it is connected to an old version of ourselves. You're allowed to receive new information and to grow. You are allowed to discover that something you once wanted no longer is the thing that you want now. You're allowed to keep wanting it too, even when other people don't understand. The goal is not to change for the sake of changing. The goal is to become honest enough that your decisions belong to the life you are actually living and not the identity you are still performing. That is where I think peace begins. Not when everybody agrees with you. Not just when the risk disappears. The risk never disappears. Not when you have a guarantee. I don't think life offers any guarantees. Peace begins when you are no longer using all of your energy to argue with what you already know. Peace begins when you stop arguing with yourself. So if you're carrying that with you, I want to leave you with space. Before you ask another person or open another tab or search for another sign or explain the situation, ask yourself these questions. What do I know before I explain it? What am I trying to protect? What would I choose if I had nobody to agree with me? And what conversation does that truth require? Then be quiet enough, long enough to hear the answer. It might not be missing, it might just be crowded. You need a room quiet enough for you to hear yourself. That's what I hope the observation room can become for you. Now, if this episode gave you language for a decision you have been carrying, subscribe and share it with someone who might need a little more room and a little less noise. If you are a leader or a founder or a person holding a decision that feels too crowded to see clearly, you can learn more by working with me at michellevaughn.co/advisory. Next time, I want to talk about what happens when the version of success you worked so hard to build no longer fits the life you're becoming. I think that conversation a lot of us are ready to have. Now, thank you for being here. I am Michelle Vaughn, and I'm your host of The Observation Room, and I will see you next Monday.